Good morning, everybody. I'm Sam Albrecht. I'm the Division Director for the Office of Regulatory Oversight. I work with building codes and standards in the Mobile Home Park Oversight Program. But today we're going to be focusing on the new administrative rules that went into effect for the building codes and standards for the manufactured modular and tiny home program. And so we'll talk about some ground rules. I'll share my screen in just a second. I've got an hour and a half scheduled for this. I don't think it will take that long, but we're certainly here an hour and a half if you guys need us. I do want to introduce some of my staff that I have on this call also. Donnie Featherman's the program manager. Amelia Spinner is the lead administrative person. And then we've got the three program coordinators also. We've got Yesenia on here that deals with the installers on a regular basis. We've also got Deb Kosman. She's fairly new. She's doing the FB and FB&R program. And we've got Christina Wilkes, and she is doing the tiny home program. So we have a lot of staff on here, and everybody can ask questions on stuff. I'm happy to take questions as we go through, but again, we've got time at the end to go into any specifics. Okay. With that, let me share my screen. Everybody should have the ability to unmute yourself if you want to, but if you don't mind, go ahead and mute yourself and until you have a question. Feel free to type stuff into the chat box also. I'll be watching that. And then Amelia and Donnie will stop me if there's a question that pops up that I don't see. Can everybody see that title screen on the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So the welcome and introduction and overview of the session I've just gone through. We'll look at the agenda in just a second. We got a few ground rules I also want to mention, and then we'll talk about what's going on with building codes and standards. We'll talk a little bit about the approved building codes that we're building to, and then again, new and modified rules that will directly affect the installers, and then we'll have that wrap up and then a general discussion. So we are recording. I mentioned that. We'll post this to the website. The other ground rules are fairly important to this. We can't change statute. The way that that works in the state is legislators make laws and we implement those laws. And those laws are codified in the Colorado Revised Statutes. And then we do an administrative rulemaking process where we have representatives from 15. We have a technical advisory committee that's made up of 15 different groups, and we have representatives for tiny homes. We have representatives for local building departments. There's an installer representative, manufacturer representative, electrical, plumbing, architect, labor, all the major groups that you can think of that are involved in building codes and standards are meet for a series of months, and then we publish those administrative rules for public comment, and then the State Housing Board approves those rules. We're not talking about changing any of the rules at this point in time. I foresee that we will probably do a rulemaking. I've got to dig into that a little bit more. Once we do that, we'll start that process. So if there are things that you don't like in the rules, you can let us know, but we can't change those right now unless it's a life safety issue that we can do through an emergency rulemaking. We're also only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules at this point in time. Stuff that's being installed out of state is, of course, going to be outside of our program. I want to talk just a second about our controlling and guiding documents if you're not familiar with them. I mentioned the Colorado Revised Statute. That's statute 2432 3301 through 2432 3329. Those are worth taking a look at. There are definitions and direction in those statutes that is not repeated in the administrative rules. The way we work is we don't do a repeat in the administrative rules, but we do refer back to the statute where necessary. But be sure and take a look at those statutes. The tiny home bill is kind of the gist for the new rules this year. That is HB 22-1242, but it did a lot more than just put and tiny homes in the statute. It added some clarification, it added some change in definitions, it added some new definitions, and of course it added some new functions that we're responsible for, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Those administrative rules that I mentioned, they are on our website also. That's 8 CCR 1302-14, and they went into effect 6/30, and we're on the website 7/1. Now, one of the things that I've done for all the stakeholders is instead of just putting the new rules and saying, here's the new rules, I've also put in a copy of the final red line version. So you can actually take a look at the red line version and see what has changed from the last set of administrative rules to this set of administrative rules. So I'm going to keep that up. I'll probably keep it up. What are we in the end of September? Probably until December. And then I'll drop that. But if you want to grab a copy of that, I've got a snippet of it right here underneath number 3. Be sure and download a copy of that PDF and keep it on hand. I have one on my desk when I'm talking about changes to the administrative rules. As you know, Building Codes and Standards takes care of the manufactured factory-built structure program for the state of Colorado. We're basically broken down into 3 different functional areas, and that's the plan reviews, the inspections and installations, and then the administrative side of that. So on the construction plans, we, as you know, we check with compliance with building code, inspections. We do the factory inspections, we do the installation inspections. We have 3 full-time inspectors that run around the state to do these inspections. On the administrative side, we've got 4 full-time equivalent over there. We take care of the registration for the manufacturers, installers, sellers, and inspectors. We process all those construction drawings and inspection requests and all the bonding and insurance documents. And then, of course, the fees. And then we also handle complaints. And we'll talk about complaints in a little bit too. On the plan review side, I've got 1 full-time engineer looking at plans, construction drawings, and then I've got 2 part-time people. We are trying to staff up quite a bit. I expect to see some more inspectors and more plan reviewers hired very soon. That'll increase our capability. If any of you follow the codes that we have adopted, there was not a big change from the last set of administrative rules to this set of administrative rules. We are still on the 2018 IBC, IRC, and all the other major building codes, except for the IECC, the International Energy Conservation Code. We're on the 2015 code still as amended. I think it's important for you guys to know that these codes are the basic codes as amended. Every state and local jurisdiction, as you guys know, has the right to amend the codes they adopt if they adopt a international code, and we have done that. We have made some tweaks to the amendments of those codes, but we've not made a major baseline change from 2018 and the 2015 code. We do expect that in the future. We have to bump up to the 21 IECC by January of 2025. I expect that we'll do a code update to the 2021 codes across the board here in a year or so. We also follow the HUD code on installation for HUD homes. And then we're also going to, we have the capability to tweak those to look at modification or alternatives if they're equivalent or better. And those requests have to come through us in writing. As you know, every building, every factory built structure coming to the state of Colorado is built to local design standards. And this includes the geographic and climatic conditions, wind load, snow load, and the winter design temps have to be on the construction drawings based on the local jurisdiction's requirements for that. Fire suppression, if it's required by the local jurisdiction, is also required. And then new in this HB 22-1242 law that was passed, we are also now, the manufacturer has to design for wildfire risk. That is new. So if a local jurisdiction has adopted a WUI code, a Wildland Urban Interface Code, we are now taking that into account, and that was effective July 1. So we're going to start seeing some of that WUI code or Wildland Interface Code come through with respect to building materials. If the local jurisdictions will be responsible for anything that's not relevant to the structure itself, such as safe space around the home, ingress and egress of driveways and things like that, that's all going to be back on the locals. But if their code has certain requirements for building materials and the structure itself, then that has to be in the construction drawings, effective immediately. If you've ever taken a look at our rules, you know that they're broken up into 7 basic rules. 1 is the definitions, 2 is codes and standards, 3 is the fees, 4 is manufacturers, 5 is sellers, 6 is installers. We'll spend a little time there today. And then, of course, 7 is in enforcement. So now I'm going to run through all the separate major changes to the administrative rules. I would ask that if you guys read those and see if you have any questions, you get in touch with us. If you have any questions today, please let us know and we'll try to get that. We have replaced what we used to, so let's just jump into it, right? Rule 1 is definitions. We have replaced alternative construction with on-site construction, OC. So those forms where we used to have AC forms are now OC forms. We've also updated the definition a little bit for on-site construction, and it's a little bit of a change from the old AC definition. So be sure and take a look at that. We've also provided updates for permanent foundations and temporary foundations, and what those are going to be. You may want to take a look at those. We are also going to allow remote video inspections. We're finalizing the procedures on that, but we do think we're going to have third-party agencies that can do the remote video inspections, and we are also looking at that from a staff perspective on whether we want to do remote inspections. Definition 1.31, that a tiny home is distinct from a tiny house. A tiny house is a 400 square foot or less modular unit built to the IRC, and it goes on a permanent foundation. A tiny home, and this kind of ties into that 132 definition. A tiny home is built on a vehicle chassis. It is under 400 square feet. It is built to the IRC. It is designed for long-term occupancy, and it may go on a permanent foundation or a temporary foundation. It can also go into an RV campground and have RV hookups. If it's in an RV hookup situation or a temporary campground situation, it does not mean that you guys need to install it. What we've told the tiny home, we'll spend more time on this when we get to the installer section in Rule 6. But basically, if we're asking the tiny home manufacturer to provide a installation handbook with 3 options. We recommended that they provide 3 options for their units. One would be an RV hookup, and that's outside of the division, right? Because it's not in a place for long-term occupancy. I have heard of some jurisdictions asking for installation of tiny homes in an RV campground, but currently we have not had a tiny home go through the program yet and get the state insignia for a state certified tiny home designed for long-term occupancy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and clarify that in a little bit. I want to get through this definition section. But those tiny home installation handbooks that come with the unit should have 3 setups: RV setup, permanent setup, permanent foundation setup, and temporary foundation setup. Okay. We and like I said, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then Rule 133 is going to be the wildfire risk update. We updated that definition a little bit. And then on this was left over from last week's. The seller definition means any person engaged in the business of selling manufactured homes or tiny homes to be installed in Colorado. And so that was just another definition that was updated in statute. So administrative rule changes in Rule 2. They have 180 days to, the manufacturers have 180 days to implement the code changes. And again, the only thing that we significantly changed was the as amended pieces. We tweaked some language. 2.1, we updated the ice barrier language. In 2.2, for IRC, we added the wild risk and foundations in areas of the state without a building department. In 2.2.13, we added some clarification regarding interconnection of smoke alarms. And then 2.2.18, of course, was follow the same ice barrier language update as the IBC. And then Appendix Q, we did extensive modifications in the 2018 IRC to bring in the Appendix AQ language out of the 2021 IRC for tiny homes. So this keeps us on the 2018 base for the IRC, but it brings in all the new stuff in 2021 for tiny homes. No big changes in IMC, IPC. The State Electrical Board has updated the National Electrical Code. We're going to do a technical notice on that just as soon as we can find some time to get that and to kind of summarize that for everybody. No change to the fuel gas code. We are now clarified in IECC, some language around the air barrier checklist requirements. Of course, no changes that we made to the federal standards. We're still following all of those. And then we added tiny homes to the Division of Housing installation standards. Rule 3 fees, no major fee updates. We did add a 3-year registration fee for manufacturers. We added a late re-registration fee of $100. We added a second plan revision fee of $100. We also added a multifamily installation fee. If you guys are doing multifamily installations, be sure and take a look at that. And then we added a foundation installation inspection fee. And I'll talk a little bit about the foundation requirements that came out of statute in just a minute. And then a waiver of the fees, wording was changed for certain nonprofits. All right, so on the Rule 4 for the manufacturers, we were calling them registered factories. We're now calling them registered manufacturers, registered and certified manufacturers. So we made that shift throughout the document. We changed the certified manufacturer status some. We talked a little bit in 412 about how certified status can be removed for manufacturers. Remember, we're on Rule 4, and then some additions to explain DOH plan review. It adds the local wildfire risk requirements in the plans, clarifies plans for that are for a specific address, adds requirements for multifamily plans, changes to the expiration of the plans, details of what's going to go into the tiny home construction drawings, and in additions to involvement of third-party agencies in the certified manufacturer status. Rule 5, the sellers have some changes. And here's where we're going to start jumping into some of the foundation requirements. 5.2 is a repeat of the requirements for manufacturers who sell direct to the consumers to register as a seller. That's again for the manufacturers. 5.7, all bonds, and this is applicable to you guys too. We'll talk about it in Rule 6. All bonds, letters of credit, or CDs must include language that the Division of Housing be listed as the agency that can call the bond if necessary due to enforcement actions. In the past, we've been seeing a lot of legacy stuff coming in with the Attorney General's office being named, but it has to be Division of Housing, and it'll get kicked back to you if it's not that way. Rule 5.12. This is important if you're working very closely with with the registered sellers. One of the new rules, new law, part of the law that was passed was that for areas of the state that do not have a building department, and let me repeat that, for areas of the state that do not have a building department, foundations must be approved, foundation design must be approved by the state of Colorado Division of Housing, and they must use a licensed architect or a licensed engineer. I think we call them generically licensed design professionals in the state of Colorado to design that foundation. In addition, the state will now be doing foundation inspections for factory-built structures. Again, this is all related to factory-built structures in areas of the state that do not have a local building department. So they are going to have to inform the sellers, are going to have to inform the buyers, if this is going into an area of the state without a building department, that they must get the foundation design approved and inspected by DOH. Now, let's jump to Rule 6, and then we can get into all the nitty-gritty on this, right? So Rule 6, I'm just highlighting the higher level changes. It's your responsibility to read and implement all rule changes. So you really do need to read the rules and the statute. So in general, tiny homes have been added. And as I mentioned, tiny homes can go on a temporary or permanent foundation. We at the Building Codes and Standards are only going to inspect temporary or permanent foundation installations, not the RV hookups. Again, that's outside of the program. We'll talk about insignias a little bit later in more detail, but units going through the state program, tiny home units going through the state program will have a pink insignia, just like the silver insignias. They will also use the same copper installation insignia, that every other manufactured home or modular home uses, okay, for installation. Rule 6.2.3, installations in areas of the state without a building department must be installed in a foundation where the design has been approved by DOH and the foundation has been inspected by DOH. If you get out there to do an installation and it has not been in an area of the state that doesn't have a building department, and it has not been approved by the Division of Housing, then we've got a problem. You guys should not be installing units on unapproved foundations. One of the reasons for this, and I'm not totally opposed to this, is that we often find that the foundations are in the complaint program. We can tie some of the issues back to the foundation, and if they've not been properly designed or inspected. And we're hoping that this will, we didn't ask for this, it was given to us, but I really think this is going to help us with some on the complaint side. But your sellers, when they sell those homes, they have to notify the buyer of this requirement. So you need to make sure, and I'm not saying the registered sellers will forget, but you guys worked in partnership with either the manufacturer or the registered seller on a lot of these installations. You guys make sure that the foundations are come through our program, and Yesenia is going to be in charge of that. All manufactured homes, tiny homes, and multifamily units must have a installation insignia. And then, as I mentioned before, that this ties to you guys, all bonds, letters of credit, or CDs must be list Division of Housing as the payable institution in case of a enforcement action. Okay, and I'm going to open it up for questions here in just a second so we can have some good discussion. But the only what I wanted to mention is the only thing we changed in Rule 7, the enforcement section, is some new text on summary and grammatical changes. And then this is the section with our website information and resources. And again, I'll get this PowerPoint up on the website in the next couple of days. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Any questions on the administrative rule changes and and specifically on the installer sections? I will also mention you can either type your question in the chat, or you can just jump in, or you can raise your hand, whatever. You can unmute yourself and ask a question at any point in time. Multifamily inspections. We've had the ability to do multifamily. We are going to now, it's now written into the rules that we will be doing multifamily inspections, and they have to be done by a registered multifamily installer. That's why our last two trainings, the one in the Springs and the one up in Weld County, I think, that we recently did, focused on multifamily installations. So if you're going to be doing those, be sure and look at the new rules on that. Make sure you're registered and classified as both. We didn't change the categories, but we did add multifamily installation requirements in there, and you need to be registered to do those. All right, questions?
Sam, I have a question.
Go ahead.
The remote inspections, are those only for foundation or installation?
Not necessarily. We expect tiny homes may be a group that, tiny home manufacturers may be a group that wants to do RVI, but any factory could.
Are there parameters in your rules Is that what
We're
we need?
working on the details.
Okay,
The rules allow it. We're gonna have some procedures that pop out here in the next week or so, I think, I hope, Robert, that'll allow some of that.
thank you.
So stand by.
All right.
Hey, Sam, I just wanted to add to that. So, Robert, for the RVIs right now, what we're trying to do is just get some better clarification on the equipment requirements, but also some kind of quality control with the actual RVI process, right? So I know ICC has a handout that they have provided for local jurisdictions to use for RVI inspections. And that's a good guidance, but we're making some changes. One of them is I think they have a minimum 4G connection. And as you know, you can have 5G and still not have good connection, right?
Right.
So what we're thinking of doing is making it a minimum of 5 megabyte download speed, which is a recommended minimum download speed for 1080p HD streaming. And then for the auditing process, we're trying to figure out kind of get a reasonable amount of quality assurance or quality control on the RVIs for making sure that there's a in-person audit going on at the factory. So not all inspections are being done RVI, but there's somebody at the site location or who goes to the site location and verifies what they're catching on camera is the same as what you'd be catching in person. So there might be some items that somewhat concern me, like cut wires. How are you going to be able to see cut wires over RVI, right? If it's very obvious, then yes, but if it's not, then it's going to be a little tougher. So that's why we need some kind of quality assurance when it comes to these RVI inspections.
Is
So that's what we're working on.
the download speed, who's going to verify that? Is the department going to verify that? Or
So it's going to be
is that
something that needs to be done during the actual inspection process. So if you have a router at home, you can link your phone to it, and you can download an app that router uses, and you can do a download speed test. And as long as that speed test is meeting that minimum 5 megabytes per second, you can go ahead and start the inspection.
No, I guess my question. Okay, my question is, does that need to be provided as verified either by the inspector or the department? I mean, is that going to be a rule for verification of that?
Yeah. So the verification will just be part of your procedures from the inspector side of things, right? So if you're the inspection agency, you want to make sure that you're getting the minimum 5 megabytes download speed prior to doing the inspection. I can give you an example. We have a factory that's here that uses a Wi-Fi system for their mobile devices, kind of like their travelers, and they get good signal up front at the front of the factory. But when you get toward the back of the factory, they start getting little connection issues, right? And so we don't want that type of situation when you're doing an inspection. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? You guys are awful quiet.
I guess, does anybody want to see the insignias?
Yeah, yeah, we can do insignias now.
All right, I'll show you the insignias, and if you have any questions, or if you think of any questions while I'm doing it, please ask. All right, so as Mo was talking, or not Mo, sorry, Sam, as Sam was talking earlier, we were doing, we added some new insignias to our inventory. And so this is the pink insignia for the tiny homes. So the technical colors are some kind of magenta, and but it's like a metallic pink color, right? And so I'm not sure how well you can see this if you change your layout on your screen to provide the speaker, the larger screen, you might be able to see it a little easier, and then everybody else on the sidebar. But this is the magenta or pink insignia. This is going to be placed on tiny homes once they are certified to meet the approved set of plans. So if you get a tiny home in your community, or you are doing an installation, for a tiny home, you will more likely see this insignia in that structure. If you do not see this insignia and the person's saying it's a tiny home, you probably want to ask more questions, right? If it's a tiny home, where's the insignia, right? Because a lot of these tiny home manufacturers, more likely than not, they're not going to leave the factory without one of these because they're doing everything in-house. Most of these are kind of like the plug and play, like everything's done at the factory location, and all they got to do is connect utilities, right? I don't see any tiny home that's going to leave the factory that needs to have items completed at the site location. So the tiny homes will most likely have these once they leave the factory. So if you're doing an installation, you'll see one of these for a tiny home. And again, if you don't see one, then ask a couple questions. If this is a tiny home, where's the insignia? And they might just say, oh, we still have some items that we need to complete out on site before we get the insignia. So that might be the case. Okay. So if you're a local jurisdiction, look out for these insignias before you give a CO. Okay. The copper insignia, this is the copper insignia that we use for, upside down. This is the copper insignia that we use for the installation of tiny homes and the FB residential. So factory built residential structures will get these copper insignias. The next one I'm going to show you is a gold color. And so you can tell the difference between the two, right? So you have the gold, then we have the copper, right? So these gold installation insignias are going to be specific to multifamily structures only. Now, each unit does not receive a installation insignia, but the structure as a whole will receive an insignia or this gold insignia to certify that the entire structure was installed correctly. Okay. And along with this new insignia, we also got black insignias. So these black insignias are going to be specific to multifamily structures only, and these are going to be for the certification that the multifamily structure unit, and when we say unit, we're talking about the dwelling for like let's say an apartment complex. Each apartment unit will receive a black insignia signifying that that unit was certified as being built to the approved set of plans. Okay.
Hey, Donnie, Robert has a question.
Yes, Robert.
Sorry, need to unmute myself. Zoning is going to dictate, right? So are you're still accepting the ANSI or a park model or an RV under the ANSI 119, or, I mean, so those are still viable product in Colorado, correct?
So,
yeah, so they're still, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, so tiny homes can still be built to the RV standard. And not go through the state program. So there's going to be some consumer confusion, I think,
Yeah.
on these. So that's why I'm starting to try to use the word state certified tiny home. There may be a better term, but it's a distinction between the tiny homes built for long-term occupancy to the IRC versus ANSI or RVIA standards. So just remember that if it doesn't have that pink silver insignia on it, it should not get a copper insignia, an installation insignia.
Yeah, I think on that's been the most difficult part on our end is when a customer comes and they have a product, trying to figure out where it's going to fit. So you have a clear path for a state approved with a state seal product, but the ANSI or the park model is still an option depending on zoning, and so is an RV. Basically, either one of those two programs.
Correct.
Depending
and
on
I've
that
tried
home
to, I put up some, Robert, on our website, some FAQs for consumers, manufacturers, local jurisdictions. So I'm trying to educate as much as possible. But you're correct. And then now there is a slight caveat to that, and that is if if and actually it's not a caveat, it's an explanation. If we're starting to see interest in tiny home villages, if 5 of these units, RV units go into a RV campground, then they're RVs, it's an RV campground and they're not mobile homes. If 5 of our state certified units go into a campground and they're being used for long-term occupancy, then it's a mobile home park. And that takes,
Wow.
that falls in the other side of my program with that. The other nuance, if you're dealing with RV manufacturers, is that there is a state statute that every RV built has to have an RVIA sticker or some type of data plate in there that it's built to what standard it is built to. So that is a state requirement. It's just not enforced by us. There's actually not an agency that I know is responsible for that, but the way it would work is if it came in and there was a problem with it, the citizen, the owner would be able to contact the Attorney General's office and see how to go after that manufacturer. Does that make sense?
So so the proper, I'm asking, proper way to tell a new client or someone that is preparing to build one of these, local zoning is going to dictate. Is that correct? Is that the proper way to tell them? I mean, depending on if the local zoning is going to accept a state approved tiny home, or local zoning accept the ANSI park model?
So if zoning requires, and Donnie, we'll get back to your insignias in just a second. If zoning requires a unit over 400 square feet for long-term occupancy,
Okay.
yes, that's up to the local jurisdiction. If they allow mobile homes, if they allow other state program units that are smaller, then that's it. If they have a limitation on saying RVs can only be used for 180 days and are not eligible for a certificate of occupancy, then the RVs can't go in there. If the local jurisdiction wants to allow RVs for long-term occupancy, and I haven't heard of any that are doing that yet, that are built to ANSI 119.5, then that's up to them. That's outside of our program.
Okay.
The best thing you can do, Robert, if you're talking to tiny home manufacturers, is to have them get in touch with us. Christina Wilkes is our tiny home program coordinator. She sits by the phone all day waiting for people to call her and talk about tiny homes. She loves it.
Okay. Great.
She says that now until I start blowing up her phone soon. Sorry, Christina. I'm coming though.
And we actually have a tiny home manufacturer on the call today. If you guys don't know Tracy, she's also a member of our technical advisory committee. She is willing to share all her knowledge.
Oh, I appreciate you, Sam. So
Yeah.
I have some questions. I want to give some samples here, and I want to talk through a couple of them with you guys because I want to try to be able to, help guide a couple people that have come to me recently on a couple of different scenarios that I really had to think through. Okay. And so I thought, matter of fact, I told one of them this morning we were going to be on this call and just to hold tight because I was going to ask some questions for them. So number one.
Tracy, also be sure and point him to that FAQ on tiny homes for manufacturers. Tracy, if you don't mind, I want you to hold your questions for just a second. That Donnie finishes insignia stuff, and then I'll come back to you. Okay?
No problem.
Okay, thanks, Donnie.
All right, I'll try to make it quick because I know there's some questions now. All right, so again, the black insignias for multifamily only, but we also have these floor tags, these black floor tags. Now, if you're familiar with our factory built residential program, we have silver insignias, and the silver insignias will have Well, now here it goes. All right, so silver insignias, right? This signifies that the factory-built residential structure was built to the code compliance, but we also have these floor tags, right? So the process is going to be the same. In these situations, each dwelling unit will receive a primary insignia, but each additional box will receive a floor tag. So to give you an example, if it's a 3-box unit, it gets 1 primary and 2 floor tags. These floor tags just signify that the other boxes are also compliant with the structure. Okay, but also gives the locals or whoever is inspecting the unit know, hey, the original approval for this was 3 total boxes, right? So if you see an addition to that unit, you're like, hey, where'd this come from? And you're looking at the insignias, you can say, all right, well, there's at least 3 boxes here, but why does this look like another unit was attached here, right? So the same process that we do for these is going to be the same process for the black insignias for the multifamily. So each unit or each dwelling within that multifamily structure will receive a primary insignia, and then the additional boxes to complete that dwelling is going to get a floor tag. All right. So the if it's a 3-box dwelling to make up that 1 apartment unit, it's going to get 1 primary and 2 floor tags. Okay. The other thing that we added is, if you're familiar with our program, we have these blue insignias for commercial structures. So these are all the FB non-residential structures. They receive these blue insignias. The one thing that we added was the blue floor tag. So I'm not sure why we didn't have these in the past, but we have them now. In the past, they used to place a primary insignia every box. Now it's going to be 1 primary, and then any additional box to complete that unit is going to have floor tags. So if it's a 3-box office building or 3-box office structure, you get 1 primary and then 2 floor tags. All righty. And then some of the ones that you might not see at all, I haven't seen these in some time. I think I've seen 1 example, but it was for a historical project. But this is a modification insignia. These insignias are for units that were approved by the division at some point in the past, but are going through like a remodel, where they might be changing the floor plan or changing a certain space, and it only requires a modification. Now, if
Donnie,
that happens,
Donnie, that's pre-installation, right?
no, it can be, well, it so I would say that if it was approved at one time, it might have been installed at one point, right? But if they want to do a modification, that modification requires that that unit goes back to a factory location, and that manufacturer modifies that structure, right? Because we only have jurisdiction of structures that are being constructed offsite at an offsite location, okay? If that modification happens at the site location, then the locals have jurisdiction, and it doesn't receive this insignia. It just gets basically a remodel permit or a change of use permit through the locals, right? So talking about change of uses, if this unit was approved at some point in the past, and let's say that it was approved as a, I don't know, let's say it was approved as a single family dwelling, and they wanted to convert it into a office building, right? Then that would be a change of use. I would say it does not get this insignia because it's although it's a somewhat of a modification, it's a change of use. It's no longer a residential building, right? Because the residential buildings would have the silver insignia. Well, it's no longer residential, now it's commercial. So it's going to get a new insignia instead of a modification insignia. All right. So again, this is the modification insignia. And then the next one we have is a component insignia. So this is, it doesn't show up very well on camera, but it's purple. So I think you could kind of see the difference between the two. So this is blue, this is purple. This insignia is for components only. So to give you an example of a component, it's just it's a smaller portion of a larger building, right? There's a lot of projects that are going on in Colorado, like the Lutheran Hospital. They're building, I would say 90% of that building on site, right? But a lot of those bathroom groups that are going into that hospital are components, because all they're doing is building the bathroom group, and then they're craning them in, sliding them in through the side of the building, and then attaching them on the inside. So those components are getting these component insignias, which are these purple insignias. All righty. Any questions on those? No. All right. The last one that we have.
I got a question on that.
Oh.
On
Yeah.
your commercial on the blue one,
Yeah.
what is that little blue sticker that goes on there again? What's the additional one?
This
What's
one?
that for? Hang on.
This little one?
Yeah, that one.
Yep. So
that
this.
little one right there. Yeah.
Yep. So this blue, the little blue one is for any additional box. So you got to remember, every unit will receive a primary insignia, right? So,
Okay.
but if it has additional boxes, so let's say it's a 3-box office building, right? That there will be one primary insignia that goes in there, and then the additional floor tags to signify that the additional boxes are also compliant with this main insignia. Basically, it's
So that works.
Okay. So it lets you know, instead of having 3 of these large ones in a 3-box office building, you're going to have 1 large one and then 3 floor tags.
Okay. Okay.
All right. And that's the
All right.
same process, like I said, that we do with our residentials. Each residential dwelling will get a primary, and then if there's additional boxes, they'll receive the floor insignias.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And the last one I have, oh, go ahead.
I'm done.
Oh, okay. All right. So the last one that I have here is a inspection only insignia. So these ones we use specifically for manufacturers who are constructing in Colorado, but for another state that we have some kind of agreement with for doing inspection. So it might be a reciprocity agreement. It might just be some communication that we had with the locals saying like, hey, we got this one building. We don't get a lot of buildings to your program, but we do have this one structure that's not your program, but your state, that's going to be built in your state, that we would like you to do the inspections for us on our behalf. So what we'll do is we'll place this green 2x2 insignia on there with our insignia number. And then sometimes we get a state like Washington where they send us their primary insignia that we'll place on the structure. So both have our green insignia and then also the state's insignia if they want us to place that on there for them. Okay. And that's all I have for insignias. Is there any questions on them or? No.
All right, so thank you, Donnie. Let's jump back to Tracy. Tracy, you had a couple questions?
Okay, well, let's start out with there is no such thing as a stupid question, okay?
Okay.
All right. So a couple of scenarios that I've seen personally pop up that I wanted to kind of put out there to you guys to get a little bit of advice on. So oftentimes you will have individual people, let's just call them the DIYer, okay? Or the tiny house purchaser, where they will go and obtain a tiny house somehow, some way, right? I don't know how, right? All the time. People will purchase their tiny house a number of different ways. They could purchase it from a DIY builder that built their own house. They could purchase it from, Clayton Homes out of Texas, and now they decide they want to move to Colorado. Okay. Or they can, purchase however. Anyways, a customer or a person ends up with a tiny house and they go to place it on their land. And for example, somebody recently placed a tiny house, bought it from a neighbor, something like that, and placed it on their land where supposedly they're allowed to put ADUs, right? Supposedly they've checked their zoning and whatever. Well, the company that did the installation for them, because I saw pictures, like at first I was looking at them and I'm like, okay, and I'm not an inspector and I'm not going to claim to be an inspector. And so I'm trying to get some advice from you guys on who these people need to contact. But and maybe it's already in the FAQ, Sam. I haven't read the FAQ for installation yet. Maybe this is already in there and you can tell me, hey, just have them read that. It's already in there. But these people need to be able to contact somebody, right? They have an installer that came and placed the tiny house for them on their land. They were an out-of-state installer. They weren't a Colorado installer, but they have experience in doing whatever. They told their customer, the end receiver of the tiny home, that they have experience in all of this, and they go and they place it. And, I'm not a happy camper with it, and I'm not even an installer, right? And I build tiny houses smaller than what I'm seeing installed in these pictures. And, for me personally, I would have prepped my customer to level out their ground. There's certain things that I would have, taught my person, but what are you guys going to do to help these people that are in those situations now? Where do you advise them to go? What number do they call? How do they get some help or support to make sure that their unit was placed legally?
So Tracy, you can always give out my phone number and Donnie's and Amelia's and Christina's phone number. But for this specific situation, it's an RV, right? By state definition, it's an RV. We don't monitor the installation of RVs on regardless of
or park models.
or park models, right? So it is going to be a situation where are going to have to get an attorney and go down that route.
So why a tiny house on wheels built 24 feet by 8 feet that weighs 12,000 pounds, that's sitting on wheels, that's meant to carry the weight, engineered foundations that are going to be holding up better than these? Why are those allowed? And these are going, like, I'm proud that we have our inspections, and I'm have no problem with the new processes. I think they look out for the best interest of everybody. But how is it that we're all not accountable equally?
Because they're not technically dwellings. They're not built for long-term occupancy, and therefore, it doesn't fall underneath the state program. I don't know any other way to say it, Tracy. It's that if the local jurisdiction has accepted it as an ADU, that's an interesting scenario on that local jurisdiction that would do that, because it's not a long-term occupancy. Unless it's coming from out of state and has some IRC documentation for it.
Well, look at like Castle Rock. Doesn't most of Castle Rock allow for ADUs?
But ADUs are long-term dwellings. They have to be defined as dwellings. So the accessory dwelling unit is that second home on a piece of property, right? It is still a home. It is still a dwelling. It's required to be a dwelling. If Castle Rock is accepting something that's an RV, then they may have specific rules on that. But again, it's not up to us.
Yep. Okay, so let me give you a different scenario.
Well, hold on just a second, Tracy. Let me add something you said, Sam. That let's say that unit, same scenario that she's talking about, but it was produced out of state and it was produced to IRC standards, but yet it doesn't have a Colorado label on it. What then?
Then that is up to the local jurisdiction. If it has a state sticker on it, and I don't know of any other state that has IRC tiny home stickers, then that manufacturer should be licensed, should be a registered manufacturer with the state of Colorado, and should be using our insignia. Robert, this is going to be a problem, and Tracy, this is going to be a problem down the road as we see other states starting to build IRC homes. And Tracy, if it's a do-it-yourselfer type of unit, there's no grandfathering clause for these to go through the state program, because we have not seen it wasn't done by a registered manufacturer. We haven't seen their QA manual. We haven't seen their third party. We haven't seen the construction drawings. There's no way for it to get a state insignia. Now, if there's another state out there that's providing those type units, I would love to talk to them.
I can see we do have a client. We have a Clayton facility that, of course, it's in Alabama, not Texas, but they produce tiny homes. That's certified for tiny homes, albeit in Alabama. They're not getting Colorado insignias, but they are built to the Appendix Q of the IRC.
So if they want to build those units for Colorado, Robert, they need to register with the program. as a registered manufacturer and follow our building codes and standards for those units to come to Colorado.
No, understand that. Why I'm saying it, I understand her question because we get those calls a lot on
Yep.
where someone
Well,
bought a
Sam,
tiny home.
well, and here's the thing. That's why people are going to continue to, those people are going to continue to stay rogue unless you guys curate a process that they feel comfortable reaching out to you guys. I don't want those calls. I'd like to be able to
Right.
guide them to you, whoever wants to help
Yeah.
them.
We'll,
You know
we'll
what I
help
mean?
them. Absolutely. We're happy to help them, Chris.
I'll jump in here. So, I think Robert, you said in a scenario that they did get the Colorado State insignia. So they actually went through a process, but it was installed by somebody who wasn't qualified to do that. Then in those types of situations, we would still step in because it still needs to be installed by somebody who's certified through our program, right? We do that. We deal with that just on the modular side of things.
See, Donnie, that's what I'm thinking too. Wouldn't we want something inspected and or we're going to wait till it falls over?
No, so if it's brought to our attention, right, we can't see everything that goes, Colorado's a large state, right? We can't see everything. But if it's brought to our attention that, hey, this home was certified through your program, it meets the tiny home requirements, but the installer who'd installed it is not registered, and there's a lot of issues with the installation. If that was brought to our attention, we would follow up with an investigation inspection, and we would determine whether or not the installation was actually out of compliance, but also during that process, as I tell our staff all the time, whenever we get a complaint, we always start from the beginning, right? It starts at the manufacturing process. Did they do what they're supposed to do? All right, great. Did they get a plan approval? Great. Did everything get inspected? Great. Did they get certified for the construction? Right. And then now it goes to the seller's part of it, right? Does the seller's contract meet everything that's required per statute and in rule? Right. As long as that's fine, great. It goes to the installation. Now, did that installer, are they registered with us? If no, then we have one item that we follow up on. Hey, why were you not registered? Right. Then the second part of it, was it installed correctly? If it's no, then again, that's another item we talk to them about. You have an issue with the installation.
But do you see kind of where I'm coming from? Why do people want to? They're scared. They know they're going to be they're accountable, or you know what I mean? Like everything. I feel like a helpful approach. Here's the truth. If they've got a park model sitting in their backyard and it's not installed correctly and it doesn't have that state insignia, you think people are going to be running to tell on themselves, or they're just going to wait till somebody files a complaint?
Well, if it's a park model, it's out of our jurisdiction. It's up to the locals, right? If the locals want to follow up with that person, they can. But our process, it's very similar how we process a modular structure, right?
Yep.
It's really no different. So it's not a difficult process. You just have to start it, right? That's probably the most difficult part is getting them to start it, right? Like, hey, this is the process for you to start getting this structure certified through our program. Once it's certified, then that's all you need to do, right? Once you get that insignia and you get the installation insignia, you're good to go, right? Because it's already been approved by our program. You shouldn't have to run into any additional problems unless you're moving the structure outside that jurisdiction, where maybe that jurisdiction doesn't allow those types of structures, right? If you're just going to keep it there and you're going to use it as the ADU and it's approved through our program, there's nothing to worry about.
So, and another way to answer that question, Tracy, your question, and I want to jump into some of these other discussion topics real quick, is that we have a process in place. We often see this on the commercial side. A factory in Texas is building a unit for Kansas, and then all of a sudden it gets to, they're selling it in Colorado. We will work with that manufacturer to make sure that that unit is built to Colorado building codes and standards. We'll do a crosswalk with the Kansas, with the codes it was built to. There's a process for that. The same with respect to the tiny homes that are being produced in Alabama. If they want to deliver them to Colorado, the factory needs to contact us, send us the construction drawings, what codes it was built to. We'll do a crosswalk on that. And then we can take a look at that. So there are processes on these one-offs and exceptions to do that. But let me jump to a couple of other things that I want to talk about. One, and I'm going to share my screen again real quick. So we've talked a lot about foundations. I think everybody should be fairly clear on that. If you have any questions on foundations for factory built structures in areas of the state without a building department, please make sure that foundation goes through our program. Okay, if you are building the foundation outside of the installation, this is notification that you need to have approval for that foundation. If you're the general contractor for that, for the homeowner, then that needs to come through us. If it's a homeowner installation, if they're going to do that, then you need to notify that homeowner that, yeah, he needs to go through our program. Complaints. I want to talk about that for just a second. We've bounced around it a little bit here and there. We are responsible for complaints that come in, and Donnie did a very nice job of explaining what our process is. I am also the state appointed authority by HUD. So any of the HUD complaints that come into the state on whether it's a factory or a manufacturer deficiency or defect, or an installation deficiency or defect, come to us. And then Donnie, like Donnie said, we make sure that everybody is registered and part of the process. If we find when we do our initial inspection, manufacturer deficiencies or defects, we notify the state and that it was manufactured in, my counterpart, the HUD representative there, and then we also notify the factory or the manufacturer of that problem. If it's an installation correction, deficiency or defect, we notify the installer of that, and it has to be fixed. Our responsibility in the state program is not to represent the owner. And I want everybody to be really clear on that. Our responsibility is to make sure that unit is designed per the approved construction drawings and correctly installed per the manufacturer's handbook or our MHIP handbook, and that is our responsibility. What often happens is a homeowner will call and complain to us about the installation or the unit, and then get attorneys involved, and then it gets rapidly spun out of control. And then they will get a settlement from somebody, the seller, the manufacturer, the installer, and then they want us to close our complaint. We will not close a complaint if there are open deficiencies in the manufacture of the home or the installation of the home. That unit cannot, we may go to the point of where we red tag that unit. It cannot be sold or transferred until those corrections are done, if it's already being occupied. And sometimes we have run into that. I know I have at least one unit that where there's a settlement, and the condition on the settlement is that we close our complaint. Sorry, we can't do it. The way they say, well, you have to, it's my complaint. No, it's not your complaint. Once you complain to the state, it became the state complaint, and the state will make sure that unit is correctly manufactured and correctly installed. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Multifamily, we talked a little bit about that. We are going to be doing multifamily inspections and require multifamily registered and certified installers. Donnie talked a little bit about insignias. Donnie, you want to talk a little bit about asset creation, or did Yesenia want to talk about that?
Yeah, if Yesenia wants to talk about it, she can. The one thing I wanted to add for the insignias, I just want to make sure that you know, it's important that you understand what the insignia is for, and also understand that that anything that goes through the state of Colorado program will have an insignia, right? And the cases that it does not, it might just not be done at the time that it left the factory, but it'll happen at the site location during our oversight inspection, right? Because we have two criteria or two tiers of registration, right? Everybody across the board has to be registered, and then we have a certified status, right? A certified factory may place an insignia at the factory for that unit, but if it's a registered factory, we place the insignia once it arrives at the site location. So if you're a local jurisdiction and you're doing an inspection, maybe for a underground or not underground, but yeah, underground, or maybe the utility connection, right? And you just walk through the unit just to make sure that there's nothing, off with the unit, and you don't see an insignia there. You can always contact us and just verify whether or not that product actually went through our program. And in most cases, we'll probably just tell you that it did, and it just needs to have the oversight inspection done, right? Which we'll go out and do a certification of the unit. But also, if you're an installer or you're a participating jurisdiction, you got to remember that you have to notify us when you are using the insignia. So that kind of relates to the asset creation. If you're not reporting insignia numbers to us and you're just placing these insignias on the units and then you try to order more, we're going to audit every time that you order insignias to make sure that you use the previous insignias. So in the past, we've been allowing installers and third-party inspectors and participating jurisdictions to order in bulk, right? Let's say you order 20, which is the maximum we'll allow you to order, unless you can justify ordering more. But let's say you order 20 and you used your 20, but you didn't report 10 of those, right? And when you try to order more, we're going to audit your insignias, and we're going to say, hey, you ordered 20 last time, you only used 10. What happened to the other 10, right? And you're like, oh, I used them. And we're going to tell you need to report them, because if you didn't report them, you're not going to receive any additional insignias. Okay, because we just don't want random people obtaining these. We've had installers lose insignias. We have inspectors lose insignias. We've had jurisdictions misplace them, right? We just don't want them to get into a situation where somebody gets their hands on those and starts placing these insignias on structures, and they have no, and they've never been through our program. Okay. I guess, Yesenia, do you want to talk about asset creation in that process and just any issues that you're running into?
Sure. So, hi everyone. This is Yesenia. Some of you have had direct communication with me. Some of you don't know me, but please feel free to reach out, either phone call or email. For asset creation, I don't have too many issues that I come across with installers that request inspections with our office. Just let's see, maybe sometimes the serial number may be missing, but I reach out to you and request that information. But the majority of the installers are great on reporting all the fields before requesting an inspection. I did want to add on the insignias that there is, if you are a certified installer or an inspector and you have lost or misplaced any of these insignias, I do need you to report those to us. We will be taking note of this, and it's not to hold it against you or anything. We just need to make sure that these insignias are being reported to us, whether they've been used on an actual structure or that you have misplaced them. In that case, we would make note of that somewhere in your account, not as a violation, but as a reporting issue. And because your insignias should not have any of the numbers already written on them or any information on them, they should be blank insignias that you're losing or misplacing. that number should not repeat itself, and we would just reissue, with a fee according, with another fee, an additional fee. We would reissue that amount of insignias to you so that you could still use that same number, so that even though you misplaced the actual physical insignia, that number that was assigned to it can still be used up. But other than that, I don't have anything else to add on asset creation or insignias.
Thank you,
Okay,
Yesenia.
thank you.
How about bond and insurance requirements? Are those coming through pretty good?
Though actually, installers and registrations have been the easiest to handle when it comes to bond and updating to the Division of Housing, and also on our previous update to reflect the amount coverage of from $10,000 to $15,000. So no issues with those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, Sam, just real quick, I just want to add for the asset creation and bonds, just make sure that you're submitting all the information that's needed. There's a lot of fields that we have changed in Salesforce that are required now. But when you're creating an asset or you're submitting, or not for the bonds, but if you're creating an asset and you're missing information, if we edit that document, so we mark it as an active asset, and it has missing information, it's going to flag it on our end, and we're not going to be able to continue. So it's best that you fill in as much information that's on that asset, so we don't have to prevent you from moving to the next step, right? Because we're going to have to reach out to you if there's missing information, and for you to fill in that information before we can mark that asset as active, or get it as a or get it through Salesforce as a complete document. Okay, it's just like a application. If you submit an application that's missing information, the application is going to get sent back to you, right, for you to fill in that information. Same process. It's just through Salesforce. When you're filling out that asset, we're asking you for specific information. And if you don't put that information in there, it's not going to allow us to continue. So we're going to reach back out to you to get that information in there. Okay.
All right, thank you. The last item on my agenda is communication, and I think communication is extremely important. I've tried to make it clear that we are all available if you guys have questions. If people come to you and have questions about the program, send them straight to us. We often find that, or sometimes find that a manufacturer or a local jurisdiction has been told one thing and it's not quite in alignment with the program. So please send questions to us, and we'll walk through them. We'll walk through the program with them very carefully so that there's not any miscommunication out there on who does what to whom and when. Donnie, does that kind of cover that one?
Yeah, again, just please reach out. That's what we're here for, right? We'll set up a meeting with you and discuss any questions that you have if we need to. If it's something that's simple that we can answer through an email, we'll do that. But just give you a heads up. If you want the short answer, Sam's a good person to ask. If you want the long answer, I will be the person to ask. Okay. I try to make sure that I give you the answer, but I also give you the reasoning behind it, right?
And that's a good point, Donnie. I think a perfect example is I had a manufacturer contact me and say, so-and-so jurisdiction is requiring us to be on the 2020 IECC. Can they do that? And I said, Sean, the short answer is no, they cannot do that. Give me a name and we'll contact them and have that conversation with them.
Yeah. But again, we're here for you guys, and then even not just you as the stakeholders, individual building departments, manufacturers, installers, inspectors, third-party agencies. We're here for the consumers as well, right? We want to make sure that if they have any questions, I suggest that instead of trying to give them the information the best that you could, or you can, just send them to us and we'll give them all the information that's needed because they might have additional questions that you don't have answers for. Okay. I'm not sure if we have it on here, Sam, but we also have 3 new emails that we added to our program, and these are general emails. Are they on here?
No, they're not on here yet.
Okay, maybe we can just send the email communication to all the I think 4.
I've still got direct emails here.
Okay, yeah, so like the tiny home program coordinator is Christina Wilkes, but we have a general email for tiny homes, and that's just because if Christina wanted to take vacation, we all have access to a general email, so we can all respond to communication. So we'll get that to you as soon as possible. Same thing for Debbie. We have
Yeah,
a
and I don't
manufacturing
have
building email.
Yesenia's on here either, Donnie.
And yeah, and Yesenia's, we have one for Yesenia as well.
Yeah.
We also have a complaints email that's a general email so that everybody has access to it. Okay, so we'll send that information out probably later this week to all the different stakeholders that we have contact information for.
And so next week, we're taking the stakeholder group meeting for the inspectors and local jurisdictions, I think is next week's meeting. So we'll have a newsletter out and we'll get those updated email addresses for everybody in that newsletter.
Okay. Yesenia had posted some in the chat if you guys want to try to do a quick copy.
Thank you, Yesenia.
But the information's there. These are just general emails, like I said, that everybody has access to these. So if somebody's out sick, out on vacation, you're not waiting for a response from them. There'll be somebody monitoring these emails.
Any other installation questions before I end this? I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I've got a couple minutes left. I will then end the recording and then I'll stick around to see if there's any follow-up items that we want to discuss, but we've got about 2 minutes left. Any other installation questions?
Sam, I do, but I don't want to keep people on. So, you know,
Right.
if anybody else
Ricky,
has,
I'll hold
before
on
me.
to you for just a minute, okay? All right, well, thanks everybody. I hope you found this useful. And again, feel free to reach out if you've got any questions. I am going to stop sharing and I am going to end the recording. Thank you very much.